Hey, Bill, thanks for being on the show.
It's good to be here with you.
So I love conversations like this, and I'm excited to talk to you because you started about the same age I did in business, that is, as a late teenager. And I always think those stories are interesting because there's something that kind of drives that like starting place. Why am I doing this at such a young age versus just, partying on the weekends, although there may have been a little bit of that too. So tell us a little bit about that. You started at a very young age in your entrepreneurial life. What was that like?
I was just bored going to high school, and there was a little strip mall right on the other side of the fence, and so I would jump over the fence and land in the back alley behind this sporting goods store, and I got to meet the husband and wife team that ran that little local business. So I got this exposure to a family business and entrepreneurship, very very early on, and this is the sort of the birth of the microcomputer industry, and they were willing to buy me a Mac if I would play with it and get their newsletter out. And so it was, just a great way to get some toys to play with. And out of that grew building a little business where we put on road races, marathons and 5Ks and 10Ks. And so at 14, I was going out and getting corporate sponsors and signing up runners and building the software to time the races. And it was just incredible education.
That's great. I think that's interesting. You talked about like the exposure to entrepreneurship. Do you think that entrepreneurship is something that you're born with inherently? Do you think it's something that you're exposed to and develop as a result of seeing it? Or do you think it's some combination of both?
Well, I think luck plays a much larger role in entrepreneurship and success than is given credit for it. All of us who have had success in building businesses have also been really lucky in the process. So I think you have to have the opportunity. You have to have there has to be some level of inherent desire to be willing to go a little bit off of the beaten path. I dropped out of college to start a software company, and it worked out really well for me. But there's a lot of risk that comes with doing that, and so you got to be willing to make those jumps. But honestly, that's one of the best times in your life that you can do it. You don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, like you can take all those risks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about all the risks I took in those early years. Because I kind of did similar things. I started at a young age. I had people around me who were willing to kind of go, hey, here's a computer, go do these things. And I was passionate enough, interested enough to go figure it out. Went to college, quit college, kept running the business, similar kind of thing. But now I have 5 children. And so the idea of taking that kind of risk now is substantially scarier. And I feel like I really feel for people who are in this like 30, 40, 50-year-old stage of life, and they have got kids at home. They get a lot more responsibility than we did back in our teens or in our low 20s. What would you say to those people? Because I still think there's plenty of opportunity, especially in our digital world now, especially honestly in the midst of the crisis that we're in right now. As horrible as this sounds, some of the greatest inventions and businesses and ideas are birthed out of seasons like this because people have a little extra time on their hands they didn't have before. So like, what would you say to those people who maybe have a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit? They got that desire, but they're scared.
Well, sometimes it takes a forcing function, right? This is the classic necessity is the mother of invention. And part of the reason so many great companies are born out of recession is some of it is the forcing function. I mean, we're going to have entrepreneurs created in this crisis because you don't have any other choice. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's what it takes. I think you just have to be smarter about it when you also have those responsibilities. But the crisis gives you the opportunity. Like if you've already lost your job, then you're not taking any risk by striking out and building something right now. You're already there. The worst thing you can do is just sit there. Mm-hmm. And instead, you look at the opportunity that's coming out of this crisis. I mean, we're all learning right now what it's like to live a decade compressed into 1 year. I mean, sometimes it feels like in quarantine, the time has just stopped. But in terms of the trends that affect business, everything has just been accelerated tremendously. And whatever business you're in, what you were looking at being, okay, this is where we were going to be 10 years from now. Well, we're there today. Like you look at everything that's happening online, the fact that we're all communicating over Zoom now. I tend to specialize in B2B, where face-to-face meetings have always been crucial in creating business opportunities in B2B. Well, that's going to bounce back some after the crisis, but it's never going to come back to the level it was before. So you're going to have to adjust your business. And in those adjustments comes huge opportunities. This is a great time if you're willing to understand where the opportunities are to go after them.
Yeah, a couple things you said there I think are really interesting. The whole idea of living a decade in a year. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. I mean, I think everybody knows that inherently. I've just never put those kind of words to it because it feels like there's been 420 days in April so far, and it's just the nature of the beast. But I think technology like Zoom, for example, which sidebar, it's so interesting to me that Zoom just managed to position themselves or somehow become like the de facto choice. I feel like in this, literally for them in the past couple of months, it's gone from them being like a service to like the service, and it's the equivalent of let's jump on a Zoom is like let's go Google something or hand me a Kleenex. All those terms are brand terms, and all of a sudden they've positioned themselves in that place. I saw a stat the other day said that in December they were averaging 10 million calls a day, and now they're averaging 300 million. So hats off to their engineers. But I think going back to what you were saying about it's probably never going to go back completely to where it was. The truth is a lot of people were not very good at either, number one, or not comfortable with video calls. Like it's kind of a weird thing to get used to. And now we're all going to be forced into that. And so it's going to be, do we really have to have an in-person meeting? And I do believe sometimes it is still better, no question about it. There's nothing that replaces human beings being on the table.
Absolutely true. But what's really interesting about using Zoom, so we took our company virtual last year, which turns out to be great timing given what's going on right now. And so I was already working at home primarily. We kept an office to have a place to come together, but I've really enjoyed working at home. Now businesses are being forced to support remote work. Mm-hmm. And when we get to the other side of this, that's not going to go away. That you have a ton of the best talent that's now going to choose to want to work remotely. And so if you're going to be competitive in your business in recruiting the best talent, you're going to have to support that. But what I've seen from Zoom is, you can't completely replace what happens in face-to-face. But now instead of having a series of phone calls to get to a face-to-face meeting, we're starting with a Zoom call. And that Zoom call is much more effective than the phone call is in building a relationship much quicker. So you can actually build a lot more relationships with more depth in them more efficiently by doing it over video conference than what we were doing before of spending a ton of time to get a handful of face-to-face meetings set up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. And you have done a lot of software work, technology type work that interconnects with marketing. In general, I'm curious, what big changes you see kind of coming down the pipe, or maybe they're already here actually, that maybe weren't here even a couple of years ago. Like, what are you kind of seeing from a technology standpoint and a marketing standpoint of how those things blend together, and how businesses can take advantage of those in the coming season? Because we're going to go through a recession, there's no question about it, and then we're going to come out of it because that's the way economies work. Just a question of how long. And when we come out of it, there often is great opportunity. How do we leverage technology? How do we leverage marketing to put those two pieces of the puzzle together to have big impact?
Well, and I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, which is there's this crazy effect that so many companies pull back from their marketing in a recession, and yet marketing is working so much better right now. Now, it's not going to directly translate to an increase in sales at this moment because of the context, but your ability to build your brand, make connections, build relationships is so much more effective right now. So the companies who are being aggressive, we're seeing 50, 80, 100% more website traffic. We're seeing that convert into a lot more leads that are adding to the audience that business now has to communicate forever forward. We're seeing LinkedIn campaigns be much more effective in terms of acceptance rates of connections, in terms of engagement of the content that we're sharing. Everything on a marketing standpoint is working better. Part of it's because so many more people are sitting in front of their computer and they're online. Part of it's because other companies are not managing this terribly well and have gone dark and are not communicating, which frankly is the worst thing that you can do in a time like this. And yet the companies who choose to, who get aggressive and really put themselves out there during a recession, those are the ones that really reap the rewards on the recovery on the other side.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of building audiences is probably something we could talk about a little bit and would help people a lot. I have seen the exact same things. It's remarkable the number of people that I've been able to get to sign up for webinars and educational pieces and materials that, to your point, are not directly generating new revenue right now, but they are massively increasing our lists. And for anybody that's watching or listening, depending on how you're consuming this content, there is great power in owning your own lists of people and connections. What I mean by that is when someone just likes your Facebook page, Facebook really kind of owns that audience. But if you have permission to email somebody or call somebody or have them on a particular list to connect with, the value of that is exponentially higher than them just liking your Facebook page. We can target those people whether they like your page or not. So let's talk about that a little bit, like the idea of building audiences and how can businesses right now use technology and use marketing to grow those lists so that when things start to turn and people are buying again, they can use those lists to massively scale actual sales. So what are you seeing?
Just to emphasize what you just said, I think it's the most undervalued asset in your business, which it's that audience that you own and control, you can talk to without paying a third-party media company. And in the end, sometimes this is a challenging subject, but where we see the most value and the most sales generated is from email. And we all get way too much email. And the solution for that in your individual business is for you to send more email. And that, it sounds contradictory, but we both know this is exactly what you have to do. The key, of course, is the email you send needs to actually be valuable to your audience. And so the key there is you just avoid what I see as the number one mistake in marketing over and over again, which is talking about yourself.
Yep.
Nobody cares. If you talk about what matters to your audience, then your email is relevant to them. They'll want to get your email. And it's not part of that, oh, I get way too much email. It's actually valuable, relevant insight that you are sharing with your audience. And that's the best audience building tool right there. Have really relevant content going to your audience that they then share. I'm really big on word of mouth. It's marketing that really works. And the great thing about us all being digitally connected is that we can really amplify that effect. And this is the best way to do it, is to share really valuable information so that when that issue comes up and someone's talking to a peer about the thing that you do, you just fed them the reason to talk about you. It creates referrals that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, this is humongous. Like people are listening right now may not realize like what you're saying and the impact it can actually have on their business. But like you or I we never even met before today or talked before today, but we're just perfectly in line with that. Email is such an interesting vehicle to me because I feel like for several years in marketing, it kind of got put on the shelf a little bit. It didn't really, but like a lot of people felt like it needed to be put on the shelf, and everybody was obsessed with like their social media followers and everything else. And yet year after year, and I mean, it's only like seems to be increasing, our actual conversions, which people know what the term means, like people that buy stuff as a result of seeing your email and then clicking on it and going somewhere and giving you money, are off the charts on email compared to basically any other online medium. And I think it goes back to what you're talking about, which is it is essentially relational building. And the biggest mistake people make in that, which is what you said, is they talk about themselves the whole time instead of the customer. Customer needs to be the hero of the story, not them. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I feel like sometimes the big, fancy, flashy emails aren't even the best. I've seen a lot of really great traffic with just simple, clean, plain text emails of like, "Hey, John, here's something we're dealing with. I thought it might have impact for you. I wanted to share it." And it could be that simple. It might not even need to like try and sell them something. It's like, I'm just trying to help you. Here's some information. And I've been shocked at how powerful that is. So let's talk about word of mouth specifically, because I don't think most people would associate word of mouth as marketing. I think they put it on its own category. That's what my gut says. And what I always tell people is the job of good marketing really is to amplify or multiply that word of mouth that you're already getting. Because my uncle always told me, look, you want to grow a great business and you want to keep it over time, do a great job for somebody and ask them to tell somebody else. That will always be the best way to get a new client. But how do we use technology to multiply that word of mouth? So what are you guys doing to help businesses take that word of mouth and then amplify it using technology?
Yeah, my favorite question when I meet a business owner for the first time is where'd your last couple of new clients come from? And of course, what I'm looking for is, it was a referral from so-and-so. Because I know with a business like that they've already done all the hard work. They're taking care of their clients. They're generating referrals. We just need more of those referrals. So if you've done that hard work, like none of this works if that isn't true, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have a great product or service. You don't take care of your customers. None of this is relevant.
That's right.
But if you do all of that, you've really done all the hard work, and suddenly marketing becomes vastly easier, because all we need to do is exactly that, amplify the effect of what's already working. And the beautiful thing about doing this in B2B is we have this wonderful tool now with LinkedIn where every single prospect we want to get to is in one place. I look at it as the perfect networking event. And right now, it is the only networking event because we don't have any other networking events to go to.
Yeah.
And yet I can go to this one place and meet only exactly the people that I want to. I don't have to eat horrible food while I'm doing it. And if you take that same attitude when you're going on LinkedIn and you're not, imagine if you went to a cocktail party and you met somebody for the first time. Do you immediately pull out your PowerPoint presentation and dive into a pitch? And yet that's what so many people do on LinkedIn. And I understand it because it worked a couple of years ago, but it's dead. You need to go in to build a relationship. And if you do that, then you can build an audience on LinkedIn of exactly the right prospects for your business. This is particularly valuable in anything that's niche, because you know who your ideal customer is. You can reach every single one of them. You can build that audience. And then you take that same insight, perspective-driven content that you're sharing on email and you share it on LinkedIn, and now you're getting in front of essentially the entire audience for who your business is the best fit for. Well, what does that actually do? It amplifies the effect of word of mouth, because you're sharing your expertise. You're getting people who already know you to recommend you and talk about you on LinkedIn in a place that's now open and exposed to all the other prospects that you have in your market. And if you do this well and you drive people back to your website so that you can then capture your email address, you now have this sort of ideal marketing machine running.
Yeah, it's so, I just love when I like connect with people that are just thinking exactly the same lines. I literally have like a little bit that I do when I'm talking about this stuff from stage, and especially if I'm in a room where I can walk around, and I'll pull out some business cards and I'll walk out the room and I'll say, what some of you do with your social media is you pull your cards out and you go, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. And I was like, who's going to buy from that guy? Nobody. And matter of fact, who's going to even ever want to see him or talk to him again? Nobody. What does that mean on social media? Unfollow, unfriend. Like, I'm not going to click on your stuff. But if it's approached the way that you're approaching it, I think this is the mindset problem that people have when it comes to technology, is they think of it as something different than dealing with people in person. And while the tool sets might be different versus coming and talking to somebody directly face to face, it's still just a relationship building tool. And if somebody comes up to me in a networking meeting and all they do is talk about themselves, it's just not that interesting, right? Like, because people think that they're more interesting than they are. We all probably think we're a little more interesting than we are. But when they ask questions and say, "Hey, this is another great social media strategy. Actually, is just ask people questions. People love to give their opinions on social media, whether it's personal or in business on LinkedIn. Ask people simple, especially questions with simple answers, because you got to think if you're on social media, people don't want to write out a long answer. But if you can give somebody a true or false or a B, C, or D, those have been some of the most successful posts I've had on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's just saying, hey, which one of these things do you like better, A or B? And all of a sudden, everybody's just A, B, down the line. I don't know what kind of content you've seen lately that's worked. Maybe let's talk about that. What have you seen? Let's talk about LinkedIn specifically that has worked really well to build those relationships and rapport in the way that we're talking about.
Well, I'm a big fan of the challenger sale approach, which is essentially a consultative approach. It's not salesy at all. It is sharing your insight and perspective and creating sales opportunities by being part of educating your audience. I mean, it's the core problem that we have now. Everything's available to us online. And if you're the dominant player in the market and you want to just sit back and be the order taker, that's great. Wonderful that you got to that place. But if you're a small business, you've got to go create sales opportunities. And the only way you can do that is to participate in the conversation and educate your market. And one of the best ways to do that is to take this challenger approach where your marketing is insight-driven content. And what you're doing is helping your audience take maybe a very specific issue in their business, but see it differently. There's nothing salesy about that. It is simply helping them understand their business better. And it's taking advantage of the fact that, so let's assume you've got a particular niche you're really good at. And so you work with hundreds or thousands of businesses that do the same kind of thing. If you're talking to the CEO in any one of those businesses, you have tremendous perspective that you can bring to them because you've got experience across hundreds and he's stuck there running his one company. And suddenly it's not a sales pitch, it is value you're bringing to them. So if that's your sales approach and if that's your approach to marketing, that's going to drive what your content is. It's enormously valuable and it changes how everybody perceives you. And the way that this ties into word of mouth is that this consultative approach is much more effective at driving referrals than just being out there constantly saying, buy from me.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And for anybody who is not familiar with this idea of the challenger sale, there's a great book around the topic called The Challenger Sale, How to Take Control of Customer Conversations, written by Brett Adamson and Matthew Dixon. I had to go look up the authors' names because I couldn't remember them. But go check out that book. It's really interesting and kind of relates to what Bill's talking about here. One of the things that I also have found really valuable as it relates to what you're talking about is to go out onto LinkedIn especially and just be the most valuable commenter on somebody else's post. Because I think so many times people think that they have to create all of their own content. And we do need to create content. There's high value in creating the right content, asking the right questions. But I think one of those strategies people should implement is if they just took 15 minutes a day and went onto LinkedIn and obviously kind of connected with people that they want to be around, but then go in and comment on some of those posts and be the most valuable, not just put a single word, but put an insightful response to whatever that they said. That feels good. It feels good when people come and comment on your stuff or people like your stuff. So why not go comment on somebody else's and kind of be that person? And I think what people don't realize in those contexts is you can be getting in front of like relatively powerful people in many cases that you would never otherwise run into at a networking event. And yet they're on LinkedIn and even Twitter can be a place where some of this can happen as well. You can end up connecting with people that you never otherwise in life would bump shoulders with. And that can be really, really valuable.
It creates sales opportunities that would have never happened any other way. It's just that you start by adding value and then that creates the opportunities. You have to change the order of how you go about it. And if there's one thing that I could get my clients to do, it would be exactly that. Spend that 15 minutes a day. I just start with 15 minutes a week because even if you did it for 15 minutes a week, you can find 30 posts to like and 4 or 5 comments to make. that level of effort will then result in not only the exposure that comes from that, but it engages your network and gets them to engage with your content.
And, you know, full transparency, I tell those ideas all the time. And I think to myself, I don't do that consistently. Like, I mean, I do it occasionally, but I don't do it like I tell other people to do it. It's like, you know, I need, but this is a good reminder. And this is why I love doing this show, is it's just a good reminder for me to go, hold on, I'm not really doing what I'm telling other people to do all the time. What if I did? Like, there really would be real value in that, because I've seen it before. But then what happens, I think, in business is you start doing some of those things, then you get busy, and then you stop doing the things that got you busy. And now you're trying to deal with the business. So, you know, let's kind of circle back a little bit to business growth as a whole. What have you seen over the time that maybe has done that to you, where maybe you thought something was going to be easier than it was and ended up taking up a lot of time, or a difficulty, or, you know, kind of a roadblock that you ran into along the way as you have built different businesses over time? What's kind of something that stood out to you that you had to overcome in those early years of business?
Well, I think the thing you're just talking about right there is a really great point, which is what we're talking about absolutely works for your marketing. So the hard part's not understanding what you should do. The hard part is actually executing on it day in and day out. That's what makes it really hard. So it's not hard to understand that this kind of insight-driven content is going to be your most effective marketing. The hard part is getting that steady stream of that content. And I've never seen other than people who just love to create content because that's who they are, your typical business owner, I've never seen it work for them to do it internally. You've got to find a resource that can take your ideas and turn it into that flow, because consistency is the key to this. It's the second biggest mistake in marketing, which is the lack of consistency. You know, what most companies do are random acts of marketing. It's just this sort of random series of things that they do when things get a little bit slow. And it's why there's such a challenge around marketing. The biggest problem is not, can we do marketing that works? It's overcoming all the things you've done in the past that didn't work because the strategy was random acts of marketing. And so the only thing that works is to do this consistently over time. And the problem is there's no miracles. It takes a long time. I mean, it's really why I'm running the company that I am today. It was because of the frustration I've had in getting great marketing for all the businesses that I've done previously. And it's, you know, this area that we're talking about marketing, it's kind of a crazy discipline because it resists all attempts at scale and efficiency. And we don't accept that in any other area of our business, but yet here we have it in marketing over and over again. I mean, I often joke about the reason somebody goes into marketing is because they don't want you to have any idea what they do. Mm. So I think this subject is just a perfect example of that problem that occurs in almost every business.
It's fascinating that you were talking about needing to get an outside perspective, because this morning I'm on a kind of a private Slack channel with a bunch of other agency owners who all do similar levels of marketing work or website development or application development, kind of general same business roughly. And one of the guys on there had commented and said, "Oh, this is kind of a weird question, but have any of you ever considered hiring another agency to do your website and your marketing?" And there were a lot of people who are kind of like, "Well, we've thought about it. We haven't actually done it, but it makes sense because it's one of those things where it is when you're inside of your own sphere, even if that's the work that you do. Like, I know how to do this stuff. I've done it since I was 12 years old. Like, I understand the world of digital marketing exceptionally well. And yet it's so hard sometimes to like get in your own thing. And it's like the barber that never gets the haircut, you know? And so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because even sometimes marketing agency owners are thinking, gosh, maybe we need somebody else on the outside to do some of these things for us, not because we're not capable of doing them, but because outside perspective in all kinds of areas, but especially in marketing, adds exceptional value.
It does. It's the consultant's trick, right? You don't have to be particularly brilliant. It's just that having that outside perspective is really valuable. You know, what we did is we changed all of our internal systems so that we could treat ourselves as a client and give the people working on our account the same credit as if it were a client. Because otherwise we had the cobbler's, kids' shoes problem. it was never getting addressed, because you always have a client that's going to be more important than yourself. And it's a tough problem to overcome.
Yeah, we literally have been in business for almost 21 years. And just last year, at some point, we just finally did what you said, which is made ourselves a client. Like, we have a client sheet, and that's how we track, what's being done for each client and how many hours are being spent and what the profitability is and who's in charge of it and what team's assigned to it, and all that stuff. And we had never put ourselves on that sheet. And now we're on that sheet. Even I personally am on that sheet, like as my own personal brand, and that is treated as an actual client now. And the amount of stuff that we've gotten done and the traction that we've gotten pre-virus, but even actually in the midst of this virus too, it's helping. The foundational stuff we've put in place, we would have never otherwise gotten done if we hadn't said, no, here's the line in the sand. This gets the same number of hours as this client. It's the same level. Here's the budget for it. Don't exceed the budget. Don't be under the budget. Just like we would anything else. That's been really helpful for us too.
Yeah, it's crazy how great it works if you actually do it.
That's the thing. It's the execution. I tend to be kind of the big idea guy, but I also really believe in, like, ideas are worthless unless you actually do something about it. So many people sit around and go, I got this idea, and so took my idea, and I'm like, what did you do about it? And they're like, well, I didn't really do anything about it, but I thought about it. I'm like, okay, well, there you go. So let's talk about the company you do actually work. Kind of been talking around the subject a little bit. Boomtime.com is the company you actually run. And interestingly, we have a lot of overlap in some of the work that we do. We're both trying to help other people grow their business using different tools and methods, but you've really focused down, and I love this, on one particular area, which is word of mouth. In the top section of your homepage, which is super clear, word of mouth, the one form of marketing that really works. What made you decide, we're going to focus on this one area, and that's the thing, that's the piece of the puzzle that we're going to really emphasize on and help our clients get traction with?
Well, because I really wanted to find a piece of marketing where we could create a blueprint for it and use it over and over again so that we could get that scale and efficiency. And I would argue that marketing in B2B today, particularly the area we specialize in, which is high value, so that there's a large long-term value to each client that you acquire. And unlike, at the birth of the internet, you could argue that B2C was actually easier during that time period. But I think that has switched. I think B2C is much more challenging now. The depth of the different kinds of strategies and tactics you need to apply are tremendous. It's, once you figure it out in B2B, it's actually really straightforward. And we've already talked about you only have to be great at 3 channels in B2B, your website, email, and LinkedIn. You execute really well on those 3, you're going to get all the business that you want. And that was really the reason for focusing there, because we saw a model where we could take that, really make it work well, and use it over and over again, and therefore have the learning across hundreds of clients apply to every single client. Because for me, it's really about the data. That's what I love about marketing these days. We've got data on everything. Like the old quote that gets attributed to John Wanamaker. I know half my advertising is wasted. I just know which half. We have the opposite problem today. We know about every single engagement that we create. We have too much data. We've got to turn that into information that we can use. But if you do that well, and you really understand the customer journey across those 3 channels, and you're able to put all those analytics to work, then every campaign is just an iteration of getting better and better and better. Yeah,
I think exactly what you said about the data is really important. It's amazing because we can see exactly what is true and what's not, but there is like a data overload. I think especially when clients start trying to fire up their own Google Analytics and they start looking through it, it's like, which of these numbers actually matter? And the scary thing is, I think our field, which is marketing in general, has gotten a bad rap because the truth is you can take that data and you can manipulate it and you can make it look however you want. I mean, I remember one time I had a client who was spending probably $100,000 a year in online ads, and the only metric that the ad company was showing them was total impressions. That was it. If people don't know what that means, an impression is just like that ad was displayed somewhere at some time, essentially. And I'm like, what is going on? You're spending $100,000 in ads and you have no idea if this is working or not. You have no idea how many conversions you have. You don't even know how many visits you really had because they're not even showing you that data. And they didn't even have access to their own analytics accounts. They got a simple little sheet with some fancy looking graphics, and it was like 2.8 million impressions. And I'm like, yeah, but, and then what? So to your point, like data overload can be risky because you got to know what data you have, and you got to know that you trust the company that you're working with. I think trust is the paramount thing. So how have you built that trust, with your clients over time, that they go, you know what, I trust Bill, I trust his company, I trust his team to take care of these things. What are you doing trust-wise? Because I think especially in this season, trust is more important than it's ever been.
Well, it actually ties back to why it's so important that you don't go dark right now, because this is the time to focus on building trust and relationships. You're going to have challenges increasing your sales because, unless you happen to be selling something that's specific to this crisis. But at the same time, because you have everyone's attention, now is the time to focus on those relationships. And, and the biggest problem with marketing is all those things. That example was perfect. That's how marketing and advertising have been sold to businesses forever. Mm-hmm. And there's a core problem just within that idea that you should lead with advertising, right? We all want more leads, and it seems like the most obvious way to do that is to advertise. But if you haven't built the marketing foundation, then there's zero chance, even if you had the right data, even if they were doing the right things, which by definition we know they weren't because of the data they were showing. We know it wasn't working, because if it was, you'd show different data.
That's right.
But if you don't have the foundation in place, then the idea that you're going to get an ROI on that advertising, it will never happen. You've got to build the foundation first so that you're capturing every lead and referral that comes to you. You're automatically following up with every single one of those leads. And then now that you're growing an audience, you're then staying top of mind with that audience. So first you build that marketing machine. And the beautiful thing about that approach is that gets all the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. And most businesses, the growth they want is right there within that low-hanging fruit. You do all that first, which is the perfect way to build trust, before you ever spend $1 on advertising. I think advertising is the big evil of marketing, because that's what breaks the whole system down, is that huge amount of money that is wasted on advertising.
Yeah, the analogy that I always give people as it relates to that is, when people spend a ton of money on ads, I don't care where the ads are, just ads in general, and they haven't worked on what you're talking about, which is the core foundations, even just their messaging, like on their website. When they come to the website, what does it say? And does it actually compel the customer to understand what their problem, that they understand their problem, and help drive them towards a clear plan and a clear solution, and show them what success looks like? If they haven't addressed those foundations, it's kind of like having a really crappy office in like a beautiful downtown location where there's lots of foot traffic. Although right now there's no foot traffic in downtown locations, but that's besides the point. There's lots of foot traffic, and they walk in the website. They all walk in the website. They walk in the office, and they go, yeah, we're not working with these people. I'm out of here. And they just turn around and walk back out. That kind of traffic's not very helpful. And then the converse can be true too. People spend all this time on these beautiful foundational elements. They have an amazing, beautiful office, all the right messaging. When people walk in, they're amazed by it, but it's buried in the woods somewhere and nobody can find it. And so I think our job is really to help people understand that and help create that right balance of, you got to get the foundation, you got to get the plumbing right first, you got to get the foundation right, you got to build the house. Once we get that right, now we got to find ways to drive traffic. But hopefully we've done a good enough job or driving a considerable amount of organic, unpaid traffic. And then we can go, all right, what are the paid avenues that might work too? Because there's still value there. It's not a total waste of money, but it also is the quickest way to light cash on fire. When you're firing up a Google ad campaign, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a smaller business, the only way you're ever going to get a return on that is to have all the other pieces in place so that you can leverage that advertising spend.
That's right.
The easiest way to test, if somebody's running ads for you right now, easiest way to test whether they have any clue what they're doing or not is there a landing page that's aligned with each different ad that they're running? If they're just sending traffic to your homepage, by definition, it's not working. And the vast majority of small businesses spending money on ads right now, that's what's happening to them. And we don't even see the numbers. All we can do is look at that and we know it's not working.
Yep, absolutely. And frankly, most people's homepages are horrible too, because they should be their primary landing page. They should describe what do they offer, how does it make that customer's life better, and how do they buy it. And if those three things aren't answered in the first, short section, they're wasting time and money already. So fix those things first. All right, we could talk about this marketing stuff all day long, and I don't think either one of us have the schedule to make that happen. So let's transition to the topic that I always want to hit on because it's really important to me, but it means something different to everybody, and that is the question of work-life balance. Number one, what does that even mean to you? Because it means something different to everybody. And number two, maybe how has that changed through different seasons of your life?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was younger, running my first couple of companies, I was working 80 hours a week, and there wasn't a lot of work-life balance there. I'm very focused on working smarter instead of harder now, and to me, it's in phases. There are times when your business needs more focus, and so I don't look for work-life balance on a daily basis. I look for it sort of across the seasons. I may need to put a lot of focus in right now in order to get this business launched or get this project working. But then I want to have time where I'm able to spend more time with my family after that. So I think the bigger picture is the only realistic way to have a reasonable amount of work-life balance. To me, this has been the silver lining of this crisis. I mean, I've been working at home for the last year. This solved the final piece, which is I was still traveling a couple of times a month. I love the fact that I'm not going anywhere right now. It's great. That extra time has been awesome for work-life balance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really valuable for me too. It's got to spend a lot more time with the kids, and now that the beaches are partially opened here, a few trips out to the beach to enjoy the fresh air, and it's been really interesting. I totally agree with you, and I think the idea that it changes over seasons of life is really important because I think it's so easy, especially on the internet now, for young entrepreneurs especially to look at other people and just idealize where they are and just assume that's how it always is. But there are usually times in the early season of a business where you got to put your head down and you're going to have to hustle. But if you keep doing that forever, at some point, you're probably going to burn yourself out, even if you actually love, because I love what I do. And I could work a ridiculous amount of hours, but I still would burn myself out. And so you got to figure out what that looks like for you personally. Two last questions. One will be, where can people find you online in your business if they want to learn more about you and what you do? And the second is, any parting advice that you'd like to leave other business owners to help them build a business that lasts?
Yeah, so I love talking about these things. You can reach out to me at ceo@boomtime.com. That's obviously the website. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn where we're demonstrating exactly the things that we're talking about here. So the insight and perspective that we give away is all the things we have learned in following the data across hundreds of B2B companies. And so you can see exactly what we have seen in that experience. I'm a big believer in the title of your podcast, and I think the Simon Sinek's newest book is just a perfect fit for that. The Infinite Game. Huge fan of it. It's the right way to build and run a business. If you haven't read it, then I recommend you go do so.
Yeah, Simon is such an interesting character. I always tell this story about him. I was at a conference that he was speaking at, and right after him, maybe right before him, I'm not sure, was Pat Lencioni. I don't know if you've seen his stuff, Ideal Team Player and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, exceptional material. But it was so interesting, and this kind of speaks to like everybody having their own way of doing things. When Simon Sinek speaks on stage, typically he comes out, he stands in a single spot, he has a spotlight on him, and he just delivers a monologue, essentially. He has very little movement. He doesn't, move around a lot. And Pat Lencioni, who's also very successful, great author, all this stuff, he's jumping all over the place. He's down in the audience. And it's just always interesting to see those two guys. It always makes me think about that when somebody brings it up. But yes, anybody who's not read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, that's a great recommendation. You may be more familiar with him out there for the idea of start with why. He has a popular TED video around that and a book around that as well. So, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and wisdom with our audience, and I hope it is helpful to them. I think it will be. It's always encouraging to me, and it's been a good reminder for me of things that I'm not doing right now that I probably need to, do what I tell other people to do. So thanks so much for being on the show.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Jay.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.